those parents. All right, so
Sure.
we're live here
Great.
on Facebook worldwide, speaking with one of my first big band directors, Mr. Gordon Lee from Portland, Oregon. Jazz educator, composer, arranger, jazz pianist, band leader. Thank you for being here, Gordon. It's a real treat and honor to speak to you again.
Well, thanks for having me, Kareem. Good to see you
Yeah,
again.
yeah. We were talking with you a couple of days ago, catching up, and you were talking about how you got started
Hmm.
in a garage band.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Uh,
I started out. Well, I'll try to keep this short. It's a long story, of course.
okay.
But so I had a hard time sleeping even as a child. And
Mhm.
so my parents bought me a radio that had a timer on it, and so I could listen to the radio and fall asleep to the radio. Except that I'd set the timer for an hour, and it would be go off, and I'd set it for another hour. It didn't work. So consequently, I got totally sucked into, the pop music world of the
Mhm.
1960s,
Yeah.
and learned every song, by heart, how all these songs went. Eventually I got some drumsticks, and I'd set up books, different thickness books on my on my chest of drawers, and like, so I had a snare drum and a tom tom, and I'd play with these sticks on the books, just beating on
Mm.
everything. So eventually I took some drum lessons, but I was a bad I might have even played drums with you. I can't remember, because occasionally I'd sit at the drum set when I was teaching at Western.
Mhm.
But anyway, so I started out as a drummer for a couple of years. So I didn't practice. I wasn't very serious. And then when I was 14, the garage band I was in, the guitar player, leader of the band, said, "Hey, we got a new drummer." And I said, "Great, what am I going to do?" And the Adam Facciolo said, "You're going to play the keyboard. You're going to play organ." And I said, "What organ? We don't have an organ." And so Adam had worked out this way where the new drummer, who was a couple years older than me, he had a station wagon. He had a
Yeah.
complete drum set and a station wagon. So I got bumped, but I ended up playing organ in this garage rock and roll band. And just a few months later, we were playing like high school dances and stuff,
Mhm.
so that's how I got my start. Was playing dance music in high schools, and I'm glad for, so it was only later that I, became aware of, you know, the gods of jazz.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
actually came later, and classical music as well, because I still study and practice a lot of classical
Yeah.
music.
What was the time like back then when you as a child who's growing, teenager, you get this desire to learn music. What were some of the things available to you as a kid back then?
Well, I knew I wanted to be a musician when I was 15 years old, and which is pretty
Hmm.
young, to have a clear desire for my career. So I'm fortunate that way. Yeah, I was, like I said, I was just totally immersed in the pop music world of the
Hmm.
1960s at that time. And so, got different. One thing I noticed, though, when I started playing as a teenager, was that I really loved to jam, to
Hmm.
just improvise. So improvising came very kind of naturally to me.
Hmm.
I mean, I was a big Deadhead. I loved the Grateful Dead and Jerry
Uh,
Garcia, and he was definitely an influence on me.
uh,
And so then when I was 16, a guy named Cliff Carter, who was the other piano player in
mhm.
my town, who worked with James Taylor for many years. But Cliff turned me on to "A Love Supreme" by John Coltrane.
Mm,
And I heard that, and I still remember that afternoon very vividly. That really kind of opened up
mhm.
my ears and opened up my mind. And I heard that Coltrane, they were just jamming, just like the Dead. They're just
Yeah.
vamping on one chord or whatever. And that was, oh yeah, I heard the connection there.
Oh.
And so, and then I was just at the right place at the right time on several occasions. Uh, I don't know if I've probably told you this, but I'm actually on a record with Miles Davis.
No, I didn't know
My hand clap is on Live at the Fillmore.
Oh.
Live at the Fillmore is a great record. It's
Yeah.
actually about the most outside music that Miles Davis ever played.
Wow.
And I was just a teenager at the time. I went to see him at the Fillmore East. And he had two keyboard players. One was somebody named Chick Corea. The other guy was Keith Jarrett. I didn't know who they were, you know.
Mm.
But that performance blew my mind, you know,
Mm.
literally like ripped open my skull. And you know, I still remember that evening very vividly too. And of course, at that time, I thought, oh, I could never do this. I could never be a jazz pianist, a jazz
Mhm.
composer. You know, you know, I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna play the 3-chord rock and roll.
Mhm.
But you know, it's gradual steps. So I was the first 4 jazz concerts I heard as a teenager. I heard Miles Davis, I heard Duke Ellington, I heard Charles Mingus and Rahsaan Roland Kirk.
Mhm.
And, you know, all
Mhm.
4 of those people, I mean, they're kind of bigger than life. You know, they're
Mhm.
really had such a presence, you know, on stage. Of course, the music is very beautiful and very strong, but something about them, they radiated this kind of power and joy that, man, it just, I didn't realize that those would be the best jazz concerts I'd
Mhm.
ever hear in my life were the first 4, you know, when I'm just starting out. But I feel very fortunate to have heard that music and experienced that. And it
Mhm.
definitely steered me to where I am now.
So you were that time you were still in New York.
Yes, I
Was
was.
it
I grew
was
up,
it was it the city or like
no, I was
around you?
born in Queens,
Mhm.
New York, but I grew up in Westchester County in a town called
Mhm.
Briarcliff Manor. And anyway, I had friends, you know, we were, I guess I started to have musician friends as a
Mhm.
teenager, and so that's continued on. I would say most of my friends, even to this day, are musicians. You know that there's a, and you
Mhm.
know you're familiar with this, that there's a sort of like a brotherhood or a guild of musicians, especially
Mhm.
jazz musicians. You know, we have a lot in common. We probably
Mhm.
play a lot of the same songs, and so you know, so it's you know, that's, you know, you have a, it's good to have a community. And for jazz music you have to search that out sometimes. You know, if I
Mhm.
lived in the middle of nowhere, you know, in a small town, that might be very difficult to find that community. But there is a community, of course. With
Mhm.
technology now, it's a lot easier to maintain those connections.
So you know you get exposed to that music. You're playing gigs in high school, and then time comes for college.
Yeah.
And back then, I'm sure there was no like jazz education path, right, for
Well,
somebody to study.
there
Yeah.
was, but I got there sort of indirectly.
Mhm.
Yeah, when I was a senior in high school, I realized I wanted to go to music school. And so I started piano lessons with a short little piano teacher, Frida Greitzer, and she was famous, notorious in our, you know, community as
Mhm.
being very stern teacher. And she, you know, listened to me, and I think she had an eyebrow cocked and said, "Well, you're going to have to practice a lot." And so I started to practice, but it really wasn't until I was 16 or 17 that I really started to take practicing seriously. But she got me into school. I started my first year of college at Syracuse University
Mhm.
and Krauss College School of Music.
Mhm.
And so I was really, at that time, I thought I wanted to pursue classical music. And I wanted to be a conductor at that time. I thought that that looked really cool. That would be a really a great experience. Um, so, um, but the year I was there at Syracuse, the music school was sort of demoted or something down to just a liberal arts school. And so
Mhm.
the school of music was now, I couldn't get a music degree.
Mhm.
And I had had a high school teacher, Sidney Polivnik, had been my teacher in high school and orchestra. And I played bass, by the way. I don't know if
I heard that. Yeah.
I could walk one chorus of a blues in F, you
Mhm.
know, and then the blisters start to come, you know. But anyway, so he had gotten his master's at Indiana University. So I
Mhm.
knew of Indiana and I really wanted to go there. So I applied and got into Indiana University.
Mhm.
And at that time, I wasn't, I mean, I think I was aware that David Baker, the great jazz educator David Baker, was
Mhm.
teaching there. But I didn't know that that was going to be for me. And when I got to Indiana, I started hanging out with musicians. And again, it was this kind of brotherhood thing of
Mhm.
jazz musicians. I should, back then it was a brotherhood, although I did know women who were studying in the jazz program
Mhm.
too. That's something that's really changed a lot since I
Mhm.
was a teenager. Is it, women, of course, have always been there, but now you just see a lot more of them performing on stage, this music, and which is a great thing.
Mhm.
But anyway, so I did end up studying with David Baker. David Baker actually
Mhm.
conducted his big band on my senior recital, which was sort of an unheard of thing in those
Mhm.
days, for a piece that I had composed for a big
Oh,
band,
nice.
featuring me and other people as soloists. So uh, again, I was just sort of in the right place at the right time. When I was going to school in Bloomington, Indiana, Indiana University, I met Richard Burdell,
Mhm.
who was a great trumpet player, who was from Portland, Oregon. And Richard talked about Portland like it was the promised land, that
Mhm.
there were gigs everywhere, and there was a great scene. And I knew that I wanted to live in New York. It's, because you're a jazz musician, you got to live in New
Mhm.
York. That was sort of the way of thinking back then. So anyway, I felt I needed some more time to get ready for that. So I came out to Portland, and through Richard met lots of other people, most notably probably Jim Pepper, the saxophone
Mhm.
player and
Mhm.
songwriter, and worked with him for many years. Richard unfortunately had ALS and died
Mhm.
about 20 years ago. He was very tragic, to see this good friend who changed my life, go through that slow deterioration where he's gradually becoming more and more paralyzed. I mean, it was really agonizing to see him go through that. But anyway, Richard left a stamp definitely upon the Portland music scene, partly because he was a jazz trumpet player. He studied with Woody Shaw. He knew
Mhm.
Woody pretty well, smoked weed with him and stuff, And Richard also would make jingles for local businesses. So Richard was very diverse and knew, like I remember at one of his parties after he was, severely paralyzed, and like Robert Cray was there, and Tom Grant and Jim Pepper, and all
Mhm.
these people who were, quote famous, from the Oregon scene, all came to his party. Curtis Salgado, I mean, all these people were there, to celebrate Richard's birthday. So he had this amazing effect upon the scene, partly because he was just so open, about all different kinds of music.
And so this was 77, right?
Yes, this
You
was in
came out.
1977, right? So actually, it was. This was just the beginning of Richard's illness, and I think
Mhm.
he died in 1998 or 99, something like that. Um, no, it was before I was teaching at Western, so yeah, it must have been 98. Anyway, but yeah, through him, so I met Jim Pepper, who was again a sort of bigger than life character.
Mhm.
Um, uh, he was American Indian, so his biggest song was probably Wichita,
Mhm.
but he's recorded Coming and Going and a Lakota song. Custer Gets It, I mean, all these songs that I
Mhm.
played many times with Jim. And
Mhm.
I actually played with Jim in Europe, in all over North America, Canada, California, New York, all over. So I was, Jim was my introduction to lots of people. He
Mhm.
introduced me to Elvin Jones, for instance. I never got a
Mhm.
chance to play with uh, with Elvin Jones,
Mhm.
but I got to meet him. And it was all through Jim, that I
Mhm.
had, opportunities like that.
And what was the Portland scene like in
Oh, the Portland
'77?
scene was great. There really was a lot of gigs. I mean, like amazingly, and I mean, I didn't pay a lot of money,
Mhm.
but I actually was working, 4 or 5 nights a week. Well, I should say that's when I came back to Portland in the mid '80s. So
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
moved from Portland to New York City
Mhm.
from 1980 to '85. And I'm glad I spent time there, but I was young and dumb and made a lot of mistakes.
Mhm.
And, but I survived. That's the main thing. And so I realized that I actually was doing better as a human being in Portland than I was doing in New York. I got into drugs real heavily, and
Mhm.
so I had to get out of there. When you got to
Mhm.
go, you got to go.
Mhm.
And so I was able to sort of pull my life together over a period of time here in Portland. But yeah, so when I came back in 1985, there were lots of gigs, and I was working 4 or 5 nights a week
Mhm.
back then. But even in the 70s, first band I played with was a band called Free Bop, led by Rich Holly. And yeah, we would play some bebop and also play some free jazz. So we're trying to
Mhm.
bring those different styles together. And we actually got gigs. I don't
Mhm.
know if that band would get gigs now, but we did back then. And and then yes, then meeting Pepper and traveling with
Mhm.
Pepper, playing Pepper's music. And I have to say, Pepper was unique because I knew even when I was young, even in my 20s, late 20s, that Jim Pepper was onto something really unique, and to
Mhm.
this day remains that way. He was the first human being to bring traditional American Indian music together with jazz, together with sort of a gospel country influence, and he was able, he'd write these sort of country gospel songs and then hire avant-garde musicians to play the music, it's just
Mhm.
like crazy stuff like that. And he could effortlessly step from the most screaming avant-garde sound to something that's just beautiful and
Uh,
almost corny and its homey feeling, and he could do that easily. There was no separation of one side from another for Jim. And Jim gave me some
mhm.
really good advice. I remember when touring with him in Europe, he said, in the long run, it doesn't make any sense to not be yourself when you're making music, when you're playing music. You have to be yourself. And so he taught me also that I have to dig down and play from the bottom of my soul every time I play, and that
Mhm.
that, that is something that you have to do. Now, that's not to say I have never played a truly commercial gig. I mean, I
Mhm.
worked on cruise ships for a while. I've played off Broadway, off Broadway shows.
Mhm.
So I played a lot of weddings and a lot of cocktail piano gigs because they paid the
Mhm.
bills. But nowadays, I feel very fortunate that for the most part, I'm playing my own music now. When I do that, when I have a gig. I do want to mention that on Monday, January 4th, I will be doing a live stream concert from the 1905 Jazz Club. So you can look for the 1905 on January 4th, Monday, January 4th, 2021, at 6 o'clock. And I'll be doing that, and or you can go. Left Door Streaming is the name of the company that will be
Mhm.
streaming that. So anyway,
And who will you be playing with?
so I got a great band. I got Renato Caranto on tenor
Mhm.
saxophone, who's one of my favorite saxophone players. Again, somebody who can, he can sort of glide easily through the
Yeah.
different styles. He can play bebop, but he also can play the most soulful, gospel style that
Mhm.
that you've ever heard, really. So I love Renato. Carlton Jackson is playing drums, and I have Dennis Caazza, another New Yorker,
Mhm.
on bass, joining me. And we're going to play a program of mostly original music, but we play some standards. So we'll play some Thelonious Monk, some Duke Ellington, some John Coltrane, some of the gods of jazz.
Now, Jim Pepper appears on your one of your records, right?
Yes, right,
Land Whales in New York.
right. I
But and
recorded.
that was done in '82.
It was recorded in 1982. It was recorded actually by a great engineer named David Baker, not the guy I
Mm-hmm.
studied with, a completely different David Baker, but who did a wonderful job at the studio. And anyway, that has Jim Pepper and Bob Moses and Calvin Hill. I was familiar with Calvin Hill from him playing with McCoy Tyner. I heard him play with McCoy Tyner, who is one of my favorite piano players of all time. And so I was felt very lucky to play with Calvin, Bob Moses, the sorcerer, on drums.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, he's a wild man. He's creative. That man is a creative guy. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
Pepper, who is also extremely creative.
Just
So it was great.
pristine. I mean, I was just listening to it the other week, and it's just execution, material arrangements, and I hear what you're saying about playing something avant-garde, but then being able to execute flawlessly, just like the
Right.
sideman, this material,
Yeah.
just
Right.
playing in the style, in the language.
Right. Yeah. We
Uh,
recorded Autumn in New York on that,
yeah.
in a very what's the word, rhapsodic style, a ballad in the rhapsodic style. So, because Jim could really do that. And it was nice to hear somebody who, but if you wanted him to play weird, man, he could play weirder than anybody. I mean, he hung out with Albert Eiler, so he'd learned, some of that language, I think, from hearing Albert play. Anyways, so I tried to represent that on Land Mills in New York, the record I made with Jim Pepper in '82.
Was it, that wasn't your first record, right?
That was the first one I recorded, but I didn't have. I've been self-produced, and well, for the most part, there's a couple that were produced by other people. But the good thing about self-producing is I get to pick what the material is going to be. So New York is not on there. What?
Wait. Even back
I produced the recording session, but it took me several years to get it together to put the record out. And it was picked up. It was licensed by Tutu Records from Germany eventually. So as I said, I've produced all my own music again because it's. Maybe it's not easy to put it in a box, which there were times when I was younger, I thought, oh, that's too bad. But now I think, no, that's good. That's good if it's hard to put it in a box. It goes in the Gordon Lee box.
Yeah, that record is, I mean, Insomnia, I love it.
Yeah.
Just such a haunting piece.
Yeah,
Land Wales is just a crazy.
Yeah, we're going to play Land Wales on the 1905 gig on January 4th.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
With that intro is just out of this world.
Yeah. It's came off well. It came off well.
I'm curious, this relationship being so important in your life as an artist, and you mentioned an advice that he gave you about being yourself. And traveling, recording, playing gigs. What other things that you can share with our audience in terms of his perception of the music? And, because it's one thing to come up in like Western European classical tradition where we like analyze the nuts and bolts, this is harmony, this goes here. Right. And I'm sure somebody like Jim Pepper had a just different understanding of where music comes from, right?
That's true. Jim was he had a couple of lessons on saxophone when he was a teenager, but basically he was self-taught. And I've played with several great musicians like that, man. They've they figure out how to express themselves through music on their instrument, and that's without having to go get a music degree. So Jim was very much like that. And I think proud of it, but a lot of times he felt that he couldn't really read music, although he could. I mean, he read Insomnia and Land Wales and Gone, some of those songs I recorded with him, which are not easy songs to read and play. And he was, he was right in there. So I think that it's more of an attitudinal thing that a lot of times musicians who haven't studied formally might feel they don't read as well, or they don't know the traditional repertoire or something. But in reality, that doesn't matter that much. Again, expressing yourself is what really matters, playing music. So yeah, Jim was something else. It was Ornette Coleman who heard Jim play way back in the 60s, but long before I knew him, and said, man, you ought to really bring your Native American side to the music, And so he was the first. I mean, of course, there were people performing traditional Native American music, but Pepper was trying to mix it together, like an alchemist, blending these different styles and sounds. And ever since, I've seen the real value of that, of, bringing different sounds and styles together.
Reminds me of an anecdote from when Piazzolla was studying with Nadia Boulanger in France, and he brought her like his homework, and she's like, well, I hear Bartok, I hear Stravinsky, right? But I don't hear Piazzolla.
Wow.
You really gotta like tap into that.
Wow, interesting, because I'd say he has a pretty distinctive style.
Yeah, well, maybe like as a student.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it developed. I mean, that's interesting to, uh, yeah, one thing I love, so I taught, that's the thing I haven't mentioned so far. I taught at Western Oregon University
Hmm.
for 20 years, just retired in 2019. I taught at Reed College
Oh man.
for 9 years, conducted the jazz bands there. Um, so, so education's been a big part of my experience.
Hmm.
Just my time. I mean, right now I feel so so sorry for music educators in this COVID time. I mean, how can it's just tough, man. How can we do that? How can
Hmm.
I didn't have to
Absolutely.
teach a class online.
Hmm.
So, I feel lucky that way. I didn't have to go through the hoops of learning how to do that. It seems like it's very difficult now. Thank God there's a vaccine on the way, and hopefully all this will be behind us someday. Um, though it's interesting, I've been composing a lot and I've been
Hmm.
practicing a lot. I mean, what else are you gonna do? You can't leave the house, and my chops are up right now. I feel pretty good about that. So that's a good thing that came
Yeah.
about from COVID.
First time I heard you play live was uh, at the old Jimmy Max,
Uh-huh.
the smaller one,
The small
and
one, yeah, yeah.
I think I even remember the whole band. Is like
Uh-huh.
Thera Memory,
Yes.
Warren Rand,
Yeah.
Renato Caranto, Mel Brown, Stembach on trombone.
Right, right.
Oh, I do remember the whole
And
band.
Andre,
Andre St. James,
Andre
correct,
St.
on the
James, yeah,
bass,
yeah,
and that band. I mean, I think that was my introduction to just the sound of like a septet, the
yeah,
repertoire you guys used to play, and just the whole like tradition of jazz.
yeah.
And how did your relationship with Mel Brown began?
Yeah,
Begin.
so I, certainly Mel Brown is one of the hugest influences in my life.
Hmm.
As long as I'm talking about influences here, I mean, Mel Brown has kept me working for over 30 years.
Wow.
That's a gig. I thought there was a jazz club called the Hobbit, and
Hmm.
back in January of 1986. Mel called me. He says, "Hey, I got 2 weekends at this club, the Hobbit. You want to play?" And I thought, yeah, okay. And so I
Hmm.
thought it was just going to be 2 weekends. Well, we went over pretty well. Got a good audience reaction.
Hmm.
So we ended up being the house band at the Hobbit for about 3 years or more. And we didn't play every weekend, but I'd say we played because there would be touring acts who would come through. I mean, Tommy Flanagan played there, Monty Alexander. I mean, like heavyweight, jazz acts. But we played, I'd say, 85% of those gigs, and so that was really great experience for me. I'm and I'm so thankful and appreciative that Mel appreciates what I do. I mean, I feel like I'm sort of a quirky, eccentric piano player, and he can deal with that. That's fine with him. And so I've always really appreciated that about Mel. That I'm going to come at it from a little different angle than a lot of other players do. But certainly all that time on stage with Mel Brown has really helped focus me. Mel loves the bop tradition, the hard bop
Hmm.
tradition.
Hmm.
So we went out of our way we played a lot of, Horace Silver songs, Art Blakey songs, Cedar Walton, all the classic
Hmm.
songwriters of the hard bop era. And Mel wanted that sound in the band, and it's great music. So I love to play that.
So that original gig, was it like a lounge or was it like a bar
It was
area?
it was a stage area. It wasn't really a
Okay.
stage, but there was a
And was
stage
this a
area.
small group
Yeah, yeah, but it
combo?
was a quintet.
Okay.
So Mel Brown on drums, Tim Gilson on bass. I still
Oh,
play with Tim Gilson all
yeah,
the time.
yeah,
Great bass player. Thera Memory, the great Thera Memory on trumpet, and
yeah,
Michael York on tenor saxophone. So it was just a
yeah.
quintet when we started out, and we worked like that for a few years. Eventually, again, I wanted to document the sound of the band, so I produced a record called Gordon Bleu,
Mm.
and which was I added Warren Rand because I always loved Warren's playing. I
Mm-hmm.
thought, Warren's a terrific alto saxophone
Mm-hmm.
player. And so we started to work as a sextet then, and we recorded the album
Okay.
as a sextet. And eventually the Hobbit closed, but then we ended up playing other places. So, for instance, several years later, we went into Jimmy Mac's, and which Jimmy Mac's was the premier jazz club in Portland for 20 years. And
Mm-hmm.
I played there for 20 years. And again, about
Mm-hmm.
80, we were there on Tuesday nights,
Mm-hmm.
which is the title of my last CD recorded with the Mel Brown Septet.
Nice.
And so Tuesday night. So again, we played 85% of all the Tuesday nights at Jimmy Mac's for 20 years. So that's a serious gig. A lot of people were lucky to have a gig for a few months with the band, and I had 20 years with Mel Brown. So, one of the great jazz drummers I've ever played with.
So, because that quintet, all of those people you mentioned, I think minus Warren Rand, you guys did. There's this record. Have you seen this video recording of you guys playing in a park?
Yes, at Blue Lake Park. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
seen
yeah.
that video, right? I know, man. I
It's a
remember that gig.
classic.
I remember
Yeah.
that gig. Yeah, it was great. There's another. I actually played a concert with Jim Pepper at Blue Lake Park, and I don't
Oh.
think that was
Mm-hmm.
videoed, which is really too bad because Pepper had this strong emotion that he could, and Pepper somehow he had a cry button in his playing. He hit this button and people would start crying.
Wow.
And so, I mean,
That's
and I've played with thousands of musicians in my career, and nobody else has this consistent cry button. And Pepper could hit that. So I remember playing at Blue Lake Park with Jim, and this would have been in the 87, 88, something like that. Anyway, but like at the end, there was like, there's a couple thousand people there, and everybody's singing along Wichita,
mm-hmm.
crying, while they're
Wow.
singing the song. And that's a powerful experience for any musician to have that, where you see that your music is affecting the listeners like that, and Pepper is the guy who has that better than anyone else I've played with.
Wow. One of the things that I remember from my this is the like early 2000s hearing you guys play was this just absolute unity as a band,
Yeah.
like not introducing the tunes verbally,
Right.
like
Right.
musical cues. And then I think you may have mentioned something about like early days when Mel Brown would have you guys over for like rehearsals,
Yeah.
and these
Yeah.
would be like serious
Yeah.
rundowns. Like,
Yeah. We
how was
rehearsed.
it formed? Like
Well,
this?
Mel just started insisting. I mean, Mel was very demanding band leader. He insisted we had to look good. So, all my gigs then, I was wearing a suit or, at least a tie and a jacket. And, he was very insistent upon that. But he also really wanted us to be tight. So we rehearsed twice a week, every week. I would say it was for 2 or 3 years like that. And that
Wow.
really helped us
Twice a
form.
week.
Twice a week, exactly. A
Oh
couple
my
hours each
gosh.
time, at least 2 hours, and that really helped tighten us up. So that, and we learned other things. Yeah, so we started segueing because way back in '87 or something, it was the first time we played the Mount Hood Festival of Jazz, which we played
Mm-hmm.
several times, but we had a limited amount of time, to play. They give you a 45-minute set, 40-minute set. So we said, well, we don't have to play the outhead. We're wasting time playing the outhead. So we decided to
That's so
segue
funny.
from one song to another. People loved that,
That's
and so
classic.
we would
Yeah.
play these continuous sets, which got extreme. I remember once playing a set that was like over 2 hours long at the Hobbit. And I'm looking at Mel like, Mel, you're killing us, man. I need a drink of water. And anyway, but that sort of became our shtick, so to say, is that we would segue directly from one song to another. I'm not going to be doing that at the 1905, but we got good at that, and there were some very valuable things I
Mm-hmm.
learned about how to do that. Is that in order to connect, and when the septet plays,
Mm-hmm.
we did our last gig was in was in February of 2020 at Christo's Pizzeria in Salem, where we do someday we'll be going back and be playing there once a month at Christo's in Salem. Anyway, so one thing that's necessary in order to segue like that is that one person sets up the new tempo. And so we learn to sort of pass this around. So it might be me, or it might be Mel Brown, or it might be Tim on the bass. You know, they set up the groove for the next song, and we freely improvise to get out of the song we were playing and then connect it to the new one. But that you need one person, you know, to do that. It's too hard to do that. You know, everybody's got a different idea about the tempo and stuff. And so we just learned certain things about how we can move from one song to another that way. So it was actually very good for then, you know, I got a master's degree in conducting years later at Portland State University. And, you know, that's exactly what a conductor does, you know, but you have to be a very, you take a deliberate step, you give a deliberate cue. This is the new tempo. And, you know, and you can't be uncertain about that. You got to be very, very precise with that. And so actually playing with Mel Brown all those years was a good preparation for me to learn about conducting.
You know what amazes me is that you know, there's this one school of thought, like sort of the Bill Evans trio, where I just I think just came out. Jack Dijonet was talking about how he was able to parachute into. They did like several, I think 1 month somewhere. Eddie Gomez on bass, Bill Evans on piano, and the reporter is asking him like, "How were you able to forego this like long-term relationship, right? Like he had with other bass players in his group." It's like, you know, I just did it. I just felt it. And then there is this sort of other school of thought, like the sort of the pickup band, like the necessity, just, you know, show up. And you have to exit the material, right? And I'm wondering, like, at the time, were there any other collectives that were taking themselves so, like, with such discipline? And because that's a big commitment, twice a week. Like you were after like something, right?
Right. No, Mel was a demanding band leader, you know, and I'm glad that he was like that, you know, that we got to rehearse every week.
So you guys would bring in new tunes?
Yes, right. So I've written a lot of music for the sextet, and then quintet, and the sextet and the septet, and so this was a chance to try that out. You know, and it's mostly my music or my arrangements on Gordon Bleu, the first record I made with Mel, but then Tuesday Night that I made many years later. And so it was sort of the trial. It's great to have a bunch of people you can, you know, okay, read this. Oh no, okay, that doesn't work there, you know, okay, rewrite, you know, and so that's a really great experience where you can hear it back right away. You know, is very, very helpful. And so I've learned certain things of what's going to be easy for a group to get, and then what's going to be tough for them to get too.
And so when then you guys land something like a Jimmy Max residency, right?
Yeah.
Then all of that preparation, right? All of that material, then it just kind of takes off, I guess.
Yes, right. Yeah, that's an opportunity to really show it off. You know, everybody in the band was performers. I mean, Thera Memory, who was incredible performer, and had, you know, everything. I mean, he could really play profoundly beautiful solos on trumpet, but then he also had like sort of tricks, you know, gimmicks. I mean, like he would sometimes just sing through the trumpet, you know, sort of scat sing through the trumpet. And people loved that, you know. It was such a simple, you know, almost corny device, but he was able to make it work for him. So that's again what I think all performers know. They all have that. They all have, you know, a trick or something that they know they're going to grab the people's attention with. And Thera was really good at that. At the same time, I don't mean to make him sound like he was a frivolous musician. You know, he had a big band that he took to play at the what's it called? Mostly Ellington Festival
Yeah.
in New York City,
Hmm.
and and they won. I can't remember what year that was. I
Hmm.
wasn't a part of that band, but I'm just saying Thera was excellent with a big band too, and inspiring young people to play and get serious about their music.
I remember coming up to him one night, and just his tone. I think I to this day I have this because I would sit right in front, and when he
Mm-hmm.
would play, it's just gonna blast your face off.
Yeah,
And
right.
I came up to him and I'm like, where do you get these? Where do you get these arrangements? And he's like looking at me like I'm like from Mars. Like this is hard bop, man. This
Yeah,
it's out there, right?
yeah, right.
But I was just so like I was like I couldn't believe this is like Hammerhead, man. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
ooh,
That's a great Wayne Shorter song. Yeah.
oh my gosh. I mean, I am so, and I mean, I came to it in the 2000s, right?
Yeah.
And there's like a whole lifetime of you guys. By the way, I think I ever saw Tuesday Night. Is that like a vinyl record?
No, no, it's on. Yeah, I got it on disc. Yeah, I got to get you a couple of my
Sure,
my
yeah. I
CDs.
don't. Well, I don't think because Gordon Blue is out. You can find it,
Right. Yeah.
but the other one I don't
Yeah.
think
No,
I've
no.
seen.
Tuesday night. Yes, on Origin Arts. Which
Oh,
is one
okay,
of the main jazz labels in
sure.
the country now. So OA2 is the division of Origin Arts. So it's
Yeah.
on Origin Arts. So yeah, you can people can download it that way. And that's my last CD, but that's why I'm looking forward to doing this video in a couple of weeks here because
Hmm.
I need to get some more stuff out there, and I am
Sure.
writing music all the time.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah, the Tuesday night kind of documents, what the band sounded like, and I'm so glad I got it with Andre St. James, who passed away a couple of years ago,
Oh man.
and the personnel has changed quite a bit Tuesday night from Thera Memory is gone now as well.
Yeah.
And Anyway, so the personnel on Tuesday night was Mel Brown, myself, Andre St. James, John Nastos on
Yeah.
alto, Renato Caranto on tenor, and Derek Sims on trumpet, Stan Bach on trombone. So yeah, so the
Hmm.
band
Yeah.
sort of expanded, over the years
Yeah.
from a
Yeah.
quintet to the septet.
And I'm a big fan of Renato Caranto.
Oh man,
And
he's
like,
such a great player.
what?
Yeah.
At which point did he become part of the origin the band? I guess
Well,
the SoCal.
Mel had played with him in some context. See, here's the funny thing is that so Renato is from the Philippines,
Hmm.
and I actually, years after the fact, I realized that I had heard Renato play back in the '80s when he was with a band, a Filipino band that had a gig at the Sheraton at the airport or something, some gig
Hmm.
like that, playing like pop music. And I don't, I remember there was a saxophone player. What I do remember about the band is when they were doing a Michael Jackson song, it sounded exactly like the record Michael Jackson. When they're doing a Madonna song, it sounded exactly like
Wow.
Madonna. And so I realized that I had heard Renato play with this band, and then years later, as he was getting more and more into being a jazz
Hmm.
musician,
Hmm.
he emigrated to the U.S. So now he's playing in the certainly an American jazz style.
Yeah.
But again, that's one of the beautiful things about jazz music is that it reaches out and brings people in from other cultures. I mean, I've had gigs where I couldn't even talk to the other people in the band. We didn't speak the same language, but we
Hmm.
know the same song and we can communicate musically by
Yeah.
playing, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I remember one of the things as an educator myself now. I think I always fall back onto what I have learned from my teachers. I
Uh-huh.
remember this it was one of like in class like you looking at the and you were like, so okay, here we go. This is like an alto saxophone player. Like you should check out this guy.
Yes.
And for you vocalists, check out
Yes.
vocal. It's just such clear, precise, like stylistic approach and direct. And in all your years working in jazz education, what are memorable things that are with you today? Like, what are some things that maybe surprised you, or that you have learned yourself?
Well, something that I'm dealing with now, because I'm an old guy now, is that one thing I was not taught at either when I was getting my undergraduate degree or my master's degree, I was not taught anything about self promotion. And I would say this is still a true weakness in my career. And that it is actually one of the most important things a musician needs to learn. When I was coming up, people got gigs through, they were hired by by a club or a concert hall or an agent. An agent would get them work. And I know there are still agents, if you're big bucks, can pull in the high, the high, a lot of money that you can still have an agent. And I've worked with a few different agents just in small ways over the years. But I would say that I'm not really great at self promotion. That many artists are not good at self promotion. That there also was almost a feeling, certainly when I was younger, that most musicians that I know are actually kind of humble. I mean, sure, I like to get up on stage and play music for people, but I don't, I'm not Chick Corea. I'm not Thelonious Monk. I'm not. So I'm humble in even playing music by those people. That's a real honor for me to do that. And so for me to get up and beat my chest and say I'm the greatest, is not something that's typical of my personality. And it's something that I think a lot of artists have a hard time doing. So something that I think in education, music education or art education, that you should have to take a class in learning how do you promote a concert? How do you promote an opening? How do you get yourself out there? And I know people who would say that's the most important thing for an artist to be doing. Personally, I think, no, I got to spend time practicing my instrument and writing new songs. But some people would say, no, that's the most important thing. The best way to spend your time is in self-promotion. So I'm just saying everyone's got to balance that somehow. It's a tough one.
Yeah, but I kind of agree with you. It is something that what helped me was to speak on behalf of like a school.
Yeah.
Because I can't, to this day I'm struggling to like put something out. But when you do it about something that you're passionate about, like a jazz program, it's a little easier because then you're not like, hey, check me out,
Yeah, right. And that's the thing about jazz music has a certain characteristic. Certain people are going to be attracted to it. I love to improvise. However, improvising is not, and let's face it, all of us have to improvise business-wise. Sometimes there's no playbook, or there probably are some, but they don't really count. They don't really help, So we have to improvise in that sense. But I just wish that way back when I was in my 30s, I'd been more focused on, okay, how do I get out there? Even though I don't think I'm as great as Chick Corea, how do I, get my name out there and get people to listen to my music? So anyway, it's a aesthetic dilemma, kind of. How do you promote yourself when you really don't think you're super great? And that's the way most, I think, artists feel about themselves. It's like, well, I'm okay, but these other people, they were the great ones, And of course, we derive inspiration from listening to those great artists. The people I've called the jazz gods. They are always and eternally inspirational for us.
So how do you do it? Like,
well,
what would be your advice? looking back on your life, like
that's what as I said, that's what I need to learn. That's a shortcoming. How do I get out there? How do I convince people that I'm great when I don't always think
Mhm.
I'm all that great. It's that's what I say. It's an aesthetic. It's an aesthetic decision. How do you do that? Aren't you
Uh,
being dishonest if you say I'm the greatest? When well, actually, you really fucked up that song.
oh yeah, yeah.
So, and everybody fucks up. I mean, and that takes a long time to learn. I mean, I can't say I hear it. A really great artist gets really good at covering their tracks so that maybe nobody noticed that they messed up somehow.
Yeah.
But that's part of the skill set. You have to learn as an improviser.
I gotta tell you, like you speaking about making mistakes. I've been. I remember. Oh, I have to tell you this. This is like homecoming moment. Like one of the greatest things that I'm thankful for to you is for making it a required textbook to have effortless mastery.
Oh, good, great. That's a great book.
Because it was you who said that it was one of the like improvisation classes. You were like, "This is the book."
Yeah,
It was 20 years ago, and
yeah,
so and then I just went like, oh, okay, meditation, who cares, like like
yeah. Right,
it's
right,
too much. I'm
right.
I know everything.
Yeah.
And then I read it like several months ago,
Uh huh.
and it just completely blew my mind from
Yeah.
a totally new perspective.
Right.
And so then, you know admitting all of these nuances in your work, like making a mistake and then accepting it and then creating
Right.
something on top of it, that's been my journey recently.
Yeah.
Being able to
Sure.
accept all that.
Absolutely. Well, Kenny Werner's a great guy, great
Hmm.
pianist. One of my favorite piano players. And I knew Kenny way back because Kenny worked with Jim Pepper also
Oh.
in
Uh-huh.
the when I was living in New York in the early '80s. So Kenny was sort of like Pepper couldn't get Kenny, he'd call me. It's
Uh,
that kind of a thing. But that's the
yeah.
way it's always been, in
Okay.
jazz music. Everyone's got their preference,
Yeah.
who they want to work with. And Kenny Werner is a masterful musician, that's for
Yeah.
sure. And he wrote that great book. But yeah, this
Yeah.
is I met him years before he ever wrote that book. I saw him a couple of years ago, and we were talking about New York and Pepper and the old days. That's one of the good things about getting old, man. You have a lot more memories, that you can share with other people. Um, yeah, that is a very good book, and yeah,
Yeah.
Kenny owns up to that. Yeah, the thing about if you're really in the music, I'd say mistakes are a lot less common. If you're really concentrating on playing the music, you don't make
Hmm.
as many mistakes. So that's a test of your concentration. How well can you concentrate? But then, Miles Davis is, famous for. I can't give you the exact quote, but like, no, you play a wrong note, or no, okay, now the music takes a different direction. uh, you know, that,
Sure. Sure.
so it's an apocryphal story. I don't know if it ever really happened, but anyways, supposedly, early on when Herbie Hancock was playing with Miles, Herbie would say, Miles, sometimes I don't know what to play. What you're playing is so great but it's so crazy. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to play. And so Miles says, well, then just sit there and look funny.
Oh, yeah, that's.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if he
Uh,
really said that, but it's a great story. And
yeah,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, figure out what you're going to do.
I
Even if
think it.
there's a mistake, even if the band is lost, what are we going to
Yeah,
do? We're all going to somehow get back together and try to end this thing together.
I think it's also this idea behind, for majority of musicians who are coming up through this conservatory training,
Hmm.
and that mistake there is like, here's the finale, and you just,
Right.
you just like lose your shit, right? That's
Yeah.
one thing. That's one thing. It's a precomposed, well established tradition that doesn't reach its conclusion, and then you have this totally improvisatory style,
Uh,
right, based on oral
yeah.
tradition, and
Yeah.
you make a mistake, and it like I just did this collaboration with this great painter from Chicago,
Cool.
and for her it's just this, things appear on paper.
Hmm.
Who says it's a mistake?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
just like
Right.
gravity
Right.
things fall.
Right. right.
And that's also kind of requires some, for me, like my personal journey is like rewiring your brain about
Yeah, sure,
what mistake is,
sure, sure.
right?
Right. And, something that I tried to stress, in my teaching was, it's a big, it's a big step forward in a musician's evolution where they don't hear something as sounding bad, but they hear, oh, that was dissonant,
Mm-hmm.
and it still might be bad, doesn't mean it's good, but I'm just saying that,
Sure.
that's a step forward to like categorize the music somehow, in your mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, mistakes are a funny thing. I hate to make them, but but it happens, and actually, it is a thrilling experience to get out of it and get back to try
Mm-hmm.
to convince the listener that they didn't hear any mistake. And I
Mm-hmm.
do think some people are really really good at that. And
Yeah.
but then again, yeah, what is the mistake? Mistake is not showing up for the gig. That is a big mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Hey, I wanted to maybe in the last few minutes that we have left,
Mhm.
giving this whole pandemic and just like the world imploding on
Yeah.
itself, like what what are some parting words you have for people who are starting or aspiring musicians, artists, and not necessarily in jazz, but
Right.
in every avenues of self-expression.
Yeah.
Looking back on your tremendous, path, what can you share with our listeners?
I would just requote what Jim Pepper said to me. I mean, play yourself. Figure out. Now that's not easy. You have to
Mm-hmm.
figure out who you are. And
Sure.
who am I? What do I want to say musically? Do I want to
Mm-hmm.
play, angry, intense music, or do I want to just play soothing, relaxing music? Or actually, a complete person does both. They have angry moments and they have other very calming, soothing moments. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, but play yourself. Make sure it's your ideas. No one else who's ever lived has received all the different influences that I have. I have my own experience. Each person is unique in their own
Mm-hmm.
experiences. I've tried to be pretty big and big tent here. Yesterday, I mean, I only practiced Debussy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on piano. Because I love Debussy, and there's
Mm-hmm.
so many ideas that Debussy had, and yet, you know, what I need to be practicing, what I should have, what I will be practicing is my own music for the gig on January 4th. But I'm saying that
Mm-hmm.
that I'm pulling from Debussy. There are different sounds and textures and sonorities he got out
Mm-hmm.
of the piano that I go, wow, yeah, I want to put that into my music. Get some of those sonorities and textures into the music.
Mm-hmm.
So 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 it's good to always be expanding your horizons and learning new music, especially if it's as a creative musician, for your own music, yeah. But you want to pull some of that sound, some of that feeling into your music. So it's always going to be good to go back and study. In that sense, I'm a traditionalist. It's always good to go
Mm-hmm.
back and study what the masters have created.
Mm-hmm.
Salvador Dali said, anything that doesn't come from the tradition is plagiarism. But you have to think about that. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
that statement.
Oof, yeah. Love
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Well, oh man, such a pleasure to have you,
Yeah,
and
Kareem.
I
Well,
really miss hearing you guys play, and
yeah.
hopefully,
Well, I look forward to playing again with you someday.
oh, it's my
I,
dream,
I
man.
mean, I
One day,
remember, I remember those days back when we had it's sort of a, uh, God, we didn't have complete sections. We only had,
yeah, yeah.
we had two saxophones and one trumpet, but still we managed to play some concerts. And, it's people like you who were carrying the music on. I feel very gratified that you and many of my other students have,
Mhm.
they see that the jazz is this big thing. It's bigger than you. It's bigger than me, and we're carrying on this tradition. And again, like I say, this kind of brotherhood, sisterhood, among people into the future that connects going back to, to the great people of the past. I mean, so Duke Ellington affected me. So I affected you, so you affect your students. I mean, like this is all a lineage, and it's great to feel like you're part of a lineage.
Yeah. Yeah, guess what is a required text in my group class?
Kenny Werner?
Yeah.
Great. That's good.
You guys got to get it. This is it. This is the truth.
Yeah, great.
But Gordon, thank you so much. So January 4, 1905,
right.
Live streaming from Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, right, yeah. Be on Facebook. So anyway, it should be a great show.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be a couple of world premieres there, new music I've written. So I'm really looking forward to that.
And the Tuesday night is out on Origin.
Yes, it's on Origin Arts. Yeah, right.
Origin Arts.
And send me your I'll mail you a copy of that and something else of your Shoulders of Giants too. So you have a hard copy. I'm traditional in that way. I want to hold it in my hand, rather than just.
I have your Gordon Blue on vinyl, by the way.
Oh man, okay, all right. Well,
one of the few copies.
That's right.
All right, sir. Well, thank you, Gordon. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too.
I'll speak
Good luck with everything you're doing, man. These are really hard times right now, but we'll get through it.
Oh yeah.
And we'll come out the other side, and we'll be making music together again.
Come on, swinging.
All right.
Have a good day.
Take care, Karim. So long.